You know, you can sit down and read 100 chapters
Yeah.
of a really dense, intricate fantasy novel.
Right.
Or you fall down this massive Reddit rabbit hole for like 3 uninterrupted hours.
Oh, yeah, totally. We all do it.
Right, and you emerge from that feeling completely energized. But the second you sit down with a nonfiction book that you genuinely want to read, you know, maybe it's something on economics or psychology,
Yeah.
20 minutes later, your brain feels like a physically squeezed sponge, like your forehead actually aches.
It literally hurts. Yeah.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the neurobiology of why our brains seem to just punish us for this kind of serious reading. And, you know, how you can biologically hack your own hardware to stop that fatigue in its tracks.
It really is one of the most frustrating experiences. I mean, because you have the motivation, right?
Right, I've got my coffee, I've got the quiet room.
Exactly. You have the coffee, the quiet room, but your biology just throws up this massive wall. And to figure out how to dismantle that wall, we really have to completely reframe what reading actually is, because we tend to think of reading as this single, unified activity.
Like a switch you just flip on.
Yeah, like you flip a switch in your brain on and boom, you're reading. But the cognitive psychology and the neurobiological sources we're looking at for this deep dive, they reveal something entirely different.
Wait, so it's not just a single switch?
Not at all. The way you interact with the text on a page completely determines which of two vastly different, fiercely opposing neurological systems takes the wheel.
Okay.
And depending on which system is currently driving your consciousness, I mean, the metabolic consequences for your brain are literally night and day.
Wait, opposing systems.
Yeah.
So there's like a literal turf war happening in my head when I open a book.
Oh, a constant turf war, yeah.
Wow.
The brain operates on this dynamic anti-correlation mechanism. So think of it as a neurological seesaw.
Okay, a seesaw.
When one side goes up, the other side is physically forced down. So to understand why your forehead hurts when you read a textbook, we first really need to meet the side of the seesaw that actually feels good.
The one that doesn't hurt. I like that one.
Exactly. And this is called the default mode network, or the DMN.
The default mode? So, I mean, this is what my brain does when I'm just sitting around doing nothing?
Yes, it is your brain's natural resting state. It's basically the introspection and wandering system.
Oh, okay.
So it activates automatically when you aren't forced to execute a specific demanding task in the outside world.
Like if I'm just staring out a window or daydreaming.
Exactly. Or just letting your mind wander while you fold laundry. The DMN is totally running the show.
See, I always thought daydreaming meant my brain was just kind of turned off.
A lot of people think that, yeah.
But you're saying it's a specific network that is actively running. Like, what exactly is lighting up in there?
It's incredibly active, actually. The DMN has a few major hubs. First, you have the medial prefrontal cortex.
Okay, you go prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, and you can think of this as the brain's me center.
The me center.
Right, because it handles self-referential processing. So it's the part of you that integrates your emotions, your identity, and like your place in the social hierarchy.
So if I'm reading a biography and I suddenly start thinking about, how I would have handled that situation.
Yeah.
Or I remember some embarrassing thing I said like 5 years ago.
That's it.
That's this me center firing up.
That is exactly it. And working right alongside it is the posterior cingulate cortex, which is partnered with an area called the precuneus.
Right, the precuneus.
Yeah, and just think of this as your personal memory archive.
Oh, I see.
It's the central hub for episodic memory, so pulling up scenes from your life.
Got it.
And finally, you have the angular gyrus, which is the meaning maker.
Meaning maker, meaning what exactly?
Well, it takes abstract concepts and integrates them into semantic meaning. It connects the dots.
Okay, so this wandering system is basically pulling up past memories. It's thinking about my ego. It's making meaning. Yes. The sources also talked about something called theory of mind being a huge part of this network.
Right, yeah.
How does that fit into all this?
So theory of mind is your innate biological ability to guess what other people are thinking and feeling.
Oh, like empathy.
Exactly. It is the empathy simulator. When you're trying to figure out why, say, a coworker gave you a weird look in a meeting,
Yeah, I've been there.
your wandering system is running this complex simulation of their mental state. It's doing what we call mental time travel.
Mental time travel.
Yeah, reflecting on past interactions to simulate future scenarios. So it's this massive, rich, internal sandbox.
I really like that analogy. It's like my brain's background simulator.
Exactly.
But obviously, I can't just live in that sandbox all day. Like, if I get an email with a really complicated spreadsheet that I need to analyze right this second,
Right.
I have to snap out of it.
And that is when the seesaw violently tips.
Oh, boy.
The internal wandering system gets suppressed, and the central executive network, which is often called the target execution network, comes online.
The executive network. I mean, this sounds like the heavy machinery of the brain.
Oh, it really is. This is your goal-oriented computational system.
Okay.
It activates during complex external tasks, logical reasoning, and high-stakes decision-making. And the anatomy running this system is completely different from the wandering network.
So what's driving this one then?
The primary driver is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Okay.
But for our purposes, let's just call this the working memory manager.
Working memory manager. Got it.
Because it's the ultimate biological supervisor. It holds on to short-term information, it switches between rules, and crucially, it enforces inhibitory control.
Wait. Inhibitory control, meaning it's actively stopping me from doing something.
It is actively stopping you from getting distracted.
Oh, wow.
It's physically suppressing the urge to slip back into that comfortable daydreaming state.
Because it wants to go back.
Always. And while this working memory manager is holding all the logic together, a second area, the posterior parietal cortex, or the spatial attention network, is locking your physical focus.
So that's what keeps my eyes on the spreadsheet.
Exactly. It keeps your eyes tracking exactly where they need to be, row by row, cell by cell.
Okay, if I'm picturing this right, it sounds a lot like my computer when it's rendering a massive video file.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Like the executive network is the CPU just maxing out, the fans are spinning, it's pushing maximum logic.
Right, it's doing the heavy lifting.
But the wandering network, the default mode, that's like the background screensaver.
Yeah.
Except while the screensaver is running, the computer is actually quietly defragmenting the hard drive.
Yeah.
It's organizing my personal files, and it's dreaming up a new project.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. The wandering network looks totally idle from the outside.
Right?
But internally, it's rich, synthesizing, and organizing. Whereas the executive network is the raw processing power tackling the immediate external puzzle.
But if they are on a seesaw, like you said, how does the brain actually know when to switch?
That's the million-dollar question.
Like, if I'm staring out the window, what flips the switch to the executive network?
So the brain has a dedicated router for this.
A router?
Yeah, it's called the salience network. And it's constantly monitoring your environment for important changes, things that are salient or noticeable.
Okay.
It's made up of the anterior insula and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or DAACC.
Gotcha.
When it detects something that demands attention, it arbitrates the turf war. It decides whether to give power to the internal wandering system or the external executive system.
Wait, so who is actually configuring this router?
Yeah.
Like, is it my conscious willpower telling my brain, hey, focus on this book? Or is my brain just, reacting to shiny objects in the room?
It's actually driven by both, which
Yeah.
is exactly why focus can feel so incredibly fragile.
Oh, that makes sense.
The router can be driven by a conscious top-down goal. So you sit down, you tell yourself, I need to pass this certification exam.
Right.
And your router forces the executive network online and suppresses the wandering system.
But I'm guessing it doesn't always work that smoothly.
No, because it is highly vulnerable to bottom-up hijacking.
The bottom-up meaning like a distraction.
Yes. A loud noise in the hallway will instantly pull you out of a daydream and snap your executive network to attention to assess the threat.
Right, like an alarm going off.
Exactly. Or, conversely, a really compelling piece of office gossip can hijack you right out of your focused executive state.
Oh, yeah, gossip gets me every time.
Right, because it drops you straight into the wandering network so you can process all those juicy social implications.
Okay, so we have this powerful internal wandering system and this heavy lifting executive system, and a router constantly switching between them. Let's map this onto the actual act of reading.
Let's do it.
Because at the end of the day, reading is really just looking at black squiggles on a piece of paper.
It is.
How do these networks interact with a book?
Well, before either of those high-level networks can even get involved, your brain has to translate those squiggles.
Right.
Biologically speaking, reading is a very new, very unnatural invention. We didn't evolve to read.
We didn't.
No, we repurposed older brain hardware to do it. So there is a foundational language layer that has to operate first.
Like a biological interface.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
When your eyes hit the page, the visual word form area kicks in. This is in the left fusiform gyrus, and it's essentially repurposed facial recognition hardware
Wow, really?
that acts as your character recognition software. Then, An area called Broca's region handles the syntax.
Wait, is that where my internal reading voice comes from? Like the little narrator in my head?
Yes, that's exactly it. That's a phonological translation happening in real time.
Huh.
And finally, Wernicke's area rapidly extracts the basic semantic meaning of those words.
Okay, so this foundational language factory is just running constantly no matter what I'm reading.
Exactly. But what happens after the words leave that factory? That is where the seesaw tips.
Okay, so let's look at what the sources call reading mode A, which is technical reading.
Right.
This is when I'm reading a math textbook or a really dense nonfiction book. This forces the executive network to take over, right?
Completely. When you read technical documents or you're reading a paper strictly for its underlying logic, the cognitive load is just immense.
Because my working memory manager is absolutely slammed.
Slammed. Because it's treating the text like a massive logic puzzle. Think about reading a complex philosophical argument.
Okay.
To understand the conclusion in sentence number 4, your working memory has to flawlessly hold the logical premises of sentences 1, 2, and 3
Oh, man.
simultaneously in your active consciousness. It is juggling abstract variables.
And what about my physical focus?
Meanwhile, your spatial attention network is locking your visual tracking, ensuring your eyes don't skip a crucial line.
And the comfortable daydreaming wandering network during all this.
Forcibly suppressed by the router, it has to be. If you let your mind wander to what you're having for dinner while reading a technical manual, the logic chain in your working memory instantly collapses.
You just drop all the variables.
Exactly.
Which really beautifully explains why reading mode B, like narrative or fiction reading, feels so radically different.
Oh, completely different.
Because this is where the wandering network actually gets to be dominant.
And this is exactly why you can read a sprawling novel for 5 hours straight without getting tired.
Because it's not a logic puzzle.
Right. When you read a narrative, your brain treats the text as an internal simulation, not an external test. You aren't trying to verify the causal structure of the universe, you're just experiencing a story.
So all those wandering hubs we talked about earlier, like the empathy simulator, the memory archive, they just completely take over.
They go into absolute overdrive. The me center and the meaning maker are actively analyzing the character's motives. The memory archive is pulling up your own past sensory experiences to render the scene.
Oh, that's wild.
Like when the author describes the sharp smell of pine needles,
Yeah.
your wandering network actually accesses your memory of that smell to make the simulation feel incredibly real.
What about the heavy computational executive network? The CPU. What's it doing?
It's basically running on idle. It's doing just enough basic work to keep your eyes moving across the page and parsing the grammar.
Right.
But all the heavy lifting is entirely handled by the simulation.
Man, this so perfectly explains the phenomenon of fake reading.
Oh, fake reading. We all know it.
Right. I know you've done this. You read a whole page of a textbook. Your eyes hit every single word. You get to the very bottom of the page and you realize you have zero idea what you just read.
Yep. Your brain was entirely somewhere else.
It's a universal experience.
Yeah.
But biologically, what's happening there? Is it a failure of the router?
That's exactly it. The salience network failed to maintain your top-down goal. It failed to suppress the wandering network.
So when I'm fake reading, my eyes are essentially just acting as an unplugged keyboard.
That's a great way to put it.
The input is happening like the visual hardware is seeing the letters, but the executive processor is just turned off.
Exactly. The wandering network hijacked your brain's computing power to daydream.
And the words.
The words are flowing through the foundational language factory, but because your working memory manager is offline, those words never actually get structurally encoded.
So you just get that vague, haunting familiarity that you looked at the page.
Yeah, you know you saw it, but you don't know what it said.
Wait, I'm trying to map this out. My wandering network is completely dominant during this fake reading of a textbook.
Right.
Does that mean the wandering network is basically useless for actual learning? Like if I'm not in executive logic mode, am I just not learning anything?
Well, you have to look at what each network is highly specialized to absorb.
Okay.
The wandering network is astonishingly powerful at absorbing empathy, narrative, character arcs, and sensory memories.
That's true.
It makes those stick for decades. I bet you can easily remember the plot of a novel you read 15 years ago.
Oh, easily. I can remember exactly how I felt when a specific character died.
Right. But the wandering network has zero capacity for logical structure, parameters, or mathematical formulas.
So no calculus in the wandering network.
No calculus. If you try to read a technical manual in a relaxed, wandering dominant state, you can't intuitively empathize your way into understanding it. The system simply isn't built for that kind of data.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. But it brings us to the core issue of this whole deep dive.
The fatigue.
The physical pain of serious reading, yeah. If technical reading forces us into this heavy executive logic mode, why does it literally make my forehead tight after like 45 minutes?
It's a very real physical sensation.
And we mentioned earlier that we need to debunk the calorie myth here.
Yes, this is a huge misconception. People just assume that thinking hard burns massive amounts of physical energy.
Which kind of makes sense intuitively.
It does. And it is true that the brain is an energy-hungry organ. It makes up about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your total resting energy.
Which sounds like a massive furnace just burning calories.
It is, but that is just the baseline.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the metabolic difference in glucose and oxygen consumption between you just spacing out on the couch where the wandering network is active
Right.
and you intensely focusing on a dense quantum physics paper where the executive network is maxed out is incredibly small.
How small?
The sources show the variance is usually under 5%.
Wait, less than a 5% difference?
Less than 5%, yeah.
So the fatigue I'm feeling is absolutely not a lack of physical energy. Like, I'm not running out of calories. I don't actually need a snack to keep reading.
No, sorry, the candy bar isn't fixing a biological energy deficit.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Then what is the real culprit? What is that physically tight, exhausted feeling in my head?
It's metabolic waste.
Waste.
Specifically, the buildup of a neurotransmitter called glutamate.
Glutamate. How does that cause a headache?
Well, to understand this, we have to look at how your neurons actually talk to each other. When you are in that executive logic mode, juggling all those variables in your working memory, your prefrontal cortex requires incredibly high-frequency neuronal firing.
Because it's working so hard.
Right. The neurons are communicating at absolute maximum speed across these tiny gaps called synaptic clefts.
Like the CPU running at 100% utilization.
Yes, exactly. And every time a neuron fires and sends a signal across that gap, it releases glutamate as the signaling molecule.
Okay, so it's shooting glutamate across the gap.
Right. And normally, the brain easily sweeps this up. But because the firing rate is so unnaturally high and sustained for so long during intense technical reading,
The brain can't keep up.
exactly, the brain's cleanup mechanisms get completely overwhelmed. It causes a massive buildup of this metabolic byproduct in the synaptic clefts.
So it's essentially a toxic buildup of trash in the synapses.
Yes. And the brain detects this accumulation. It realizes that if this continues, the neurons could suffer from overexcitation and actual damage.
Wow, so it's a safety hazard.
Yeah, so to protect itself, the brain triggers a protective inhibition. It forcefully slows down the firing rate of your prefrontal cortex.
Oh, I see.
That forced biological slowdown, that protective braking mechanism, that is the physical sensation of brain fog.
That is mind-blowing.
Your brain is literally forcing you to stop thinking so it can take out the trash.
Wow. So I'm not weak. My brain is just protecting itself from glutamate poison.
You're not weak at all, it's just biology.
But it's not just the glutamate, right? The sources also highlighted something called the willpower tax.
Yes. Remember how the executive network has to constantly use the router to suppress the wandering network so you don't daydream?
The inhibitory control.
Right. Maintaining that suppression requires constant, active neurological signaling.
Because the wandering network wants to turn back on.
It constantly wants to turn on. It is your default state of being, so you are expending immense, invisible neurological effort just fighting your own natural biological urge to wander.
So if I'm understanding this, it's essentially like driving a car with the parking brake securely engaged.
Yes.
Like the engine isn't just working to move the car forward, which is parsing the text. It's burning fuel, fighting the brakes, which is suppressing the daydreaming. No wonder we're exhausted.
It's exhausting. And if we flip your analogy, it perfectly explains why reading a fictional story feels so effortless.
Because a compelling narrative completely disengages the parking brake.
Exactly.
Because a story requires no rigorous causal verification. Like, I'm not fact-checking the wizard in my fantasy novel.
Right, the working memory manager can just rest. You aren't fighting to suppress the wandering network, you are actively utilizing it.
So the brain is just cruising.
It allows the brain to cruise at its resting metabolic baseline, sweeping away glutamate rather than building it up.
Okay, so we know the biology. We have the glutamate trash buildup and the willpower tax. But here's where I want to push a bit on how the modern world fits into this.
Okay, sure.
How does the format of what we read trigger these networks? Like, why can I read 50 different blog posts or an endless social media feed for hours without any glutamate brain fog, but a nonfiction book wrecks me in half an hour?
It really comes down to information architecture and how different formats totally exploit the limits of your working memory. Let's look at the burden of context.
The burden of context. What is that?
Well, when you read short-form content, an AI-generated answer, a blog post, a social media thread, the information is heavily artificially formatted.
Right.
You have visual scaffolds, bullet points, bold text, incredibly short paragraphs. The information is essentially pre-digested into these bite-sized capsules.
It's highly skimmable. Like, I don't have
Yeah.
to work for it.
Exactly. But more importantly, it is context on demand. Your working memory manager doesn't have to juggle 5 different premises at once.
Oh, I see.
A blog post gives you the conclusion immediately, backs it up with a single quick example, and closes the loop. It asks almost nothing of your working memory.
But a book does the opposite.
A physical nonfiction book requires what we call long-range memory mounting.
Long-range memory mounting.
Yeah. If you are reading Chapter 5 of a dense historical analysis, your executive network is forced to hold the core assumptions, the theoretical frameworks, and the complex arguments from Chapters 1 through 4 in the background, just to make sense of the current page.
So a book forces my brain to act as a compiler. Like, it dumps hundreds of pages of raw data on me, and my executive CPU have to filter out the fluff, hold the important bits in active memory, and try to build a cohesive skeleton out of it.
And maintaining that massive multi-chapter context stack is exactly what causes that rapid, overwhelming glutamate accumulation.
Because my neurons are firing nonstop, just to keep the stack from falling over.
Exactly. Short-form reading never requires that stack.
So the internet is basically feeding us pre-compiled code that just runs easily on our mental hardware, while a book hands us raw source code and forces our biology to compile it line by laborious line.
That is exactly the computational load difference. But it's not just the memory load that makes blogs easier, it's also how they interact with your dopamine system.
Oh, the neurochemical reward loop.
Right. Short-form reading provides a very tight, instant dopamine loop.
How so?
You see a headline, curiosity is generated, you click, you read for 60 seconds, the curiosity is satisfied, boom, dopamine release.
Oh, yeah.
This constant neurochemical drip keeps the brain incredibly happy, focused, and low stress.
Whereas a 400-page book on macroeconomics
Delays that closure for days or even weeks. You are operating the executive network under high internal resistance, building up toxic glutamate, without any immediate dopamine payout to counteract the stress of the effort.
Man. And the sources also mentioned an invisible assessment pressure when it comes to books.
Yeah.
How does that factor in?
It's the psychological stance you take before you even read the first word.
Okay.
Opening a blog triggers the wandering network's spectator mode. Your internal monologue says, I'm just browsing. If I don't like it, I'll just click away.
Right. Zero stakes.
But opening a physical book you purchased, that triggers executive alarm bells.
Because I spent money on it.
I spent money on this, I must finish it. I must extract a coherent intellectual framework from it. That pressure literally forces the router to lock you into the high-energy executive mode instantly.
Does this mean the book format is inherently flawed for human biology? Like, are we just not evolved to read 400-page logical arguments?
No, the format itself isn't flawed. What is deeply flawed is our traditional approach to reading them.
Our approach.
Yes, when we force a strict, linear, cover-to-cover, top-down executive approach on every single nonfiction book, we are practically guaranteeing biological burnout. The human brain was simply not built to sustain that kind of isolated working memory load for hours on end without relief.
But wait, if books require so much grueling compilation, how do academics, critics, and, avid nonfiction readers do this all day?
That's a great question.
I mean, I have friends who devour history and philosophy books on the weekend for fun, and they never seem to get brain fog. Do they just have mutated, superpowered prefrontal cortices that just don't produce glutamate?
That is the expert reader anomaly.
Okay.
And interestingly, no, they do not have superpowered executive networks. In fact, neuroscience shows it's the exact opposite.
The opposite.
They rely on massively developed knowledge schemas.
Schemas. So, long-term memory maps.
Think of it this way. When a beginner reads a book on quantum physics, their executive network has to parse every single word logically from scratch.
Because everything is new.
Right. Every concept is a new variable to juggle, but an expert already has a vast, highly interconnected map of quantum physics stored securely in their long-term memory.
So how does having that map actually change the brain activation?
Well, instead of using the high-energy executive network to calculate the logic of every single sentence, the expert's brain uses rapid pattern recognition in the temporal and parietal lobes.
Oh,
They instantly chunk concepts together. They see a complex paragraph and their brain just automatically registers, that's just the Copenhagen interpretation again.
so they don't even have to hold all the individual premises in their working memory.
Exactly. The computational load on their working memory is physically 80% lower than a beginner's.
Okay, so it's like an experienced musician reading sheet music.
Yes.
Like a beginner is looking at the page and calculating every single note, like, okay, that's an E, move this finger to this fret, which is total executive overload.
Perfect analogy.
But a master just sees the visual pattern on the staff and thinks, oh, C major scale run, and their hands execute it automatically.
Well, exactly.
That chunking leaves their mind free to feel the emotion of the piece, which means they get to use the wandering network.
Yes. And neuroscience completely confirms this with the neural efficiency hypothesis.
What's that?
Studies show that an expert's brain actually shows less prefrontal cortex activation than a novice's brain during complex tasks.
Because they're just more efficient.
Because they are using established neural pathways, their metabolic load is significantly lower, meaning they produce far less glutamate.
Wow.
Furthermore, they develop better metabolic adaptation, so their brains literally become physically more efficient at clearing out the waste that they do produce.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But it's not just about having a massive library of prior knowledge, right?
Yeah.
The sources also talked about how experts managed to hack their dopamine system, something called RPE.
Yes, reward prediction error. Experts have essentially rewired their reward circuitry.
Rewired it how?
When a novice reads dense material, it is a slog for survival. But an expert reads actively looking for puzzles.
Like a game?
Exactly. When an expert finds a logical flaw in an author's argument, or finally connects an abstract puzzle piece they've been wondering about for years, it triggers a massive dopamine release in the brain's core reward circuit, the VTA-NAC pathway.
And what does that dopamine actually do in this context? Like physically?
That hit of dopamine chemically counteracts the prefrontal fatigue. It provides acute biochemical stamina. It makes the grueling effort feel exhilarating instead of exhausting.
So they're getting the instant dopamine loops of short-form internet content, but they're generating it internally from the deep text.
Yes. And because of this, experts naturally engage in a behavior we call micro-switching, or the hybrid mode.
Micro-switching.
They never stay locked in the executive network for long.
So how does micro-switching work in practice? Like, what are they actually doing?
They rapidly pulse between the two networks. They use the executive network for a few intense seconds to extract the skeletal premise of a paragraph.
Okay.
Once they have that skeleton, they immediately drop into the wandering network. They sit back and let their brain passively associate that new idea with a past book they read or a historical event or even a personal experience.
So they let it marinate.
They let it simmer in the simulation for a moment, enjoying the connection, before dipping back into the executive network for the next paragraph.
They are pulsing the breaks instead of writing them.
Exactly.
That is brilliant. Okay, so this brings us to the most crucial part of this deep dive. How do we actually use this information? Because I can't build an expert's 20-year knowledge schema overnight.
No, you can't.
But according to the sources, we can actively manipulate our interaction with the text to basically force our wandering network to take over. We can make dense reading feel effortless. Let's dig into the practical protocol.
Let's do it. So the first step is to break the linear ritual. Stop reading nonfiction cover to cover.
Because that triggers the invisible assessment pressure.
Exactly. When you tell yourself you have to read from page 1 to page 400, the executive network locks in for a marathon. It braces for impact.
Right.
Instead, treat the book like a table of contents treasure hunt.
A treasure hunt.
Scan the index, look at the chapters, and jump straight to the one single chapter that genuinely spikes your curiosity right now.
So I'd literally just ignore the first 5 chapters and jump straight to chapter 6.
Yes. Read 5 to 10 pages of that chapter just to get an aha moment, a single new insight, and then close the book.
Just close it. Like, don't finish the thought.
If you want to stop, stop. This deliberately replicates the instant dopamine loop of internet reading.
Oh, I see.
It completely removes the long-range context burden from your working memory. You get the insight, you get the dopamine, and you leave before the glutamate builds up.
I love that. Now, the next technique is fascinating because it uses modern tools,
Okay.
using AI as a pre-compiler.
Yes, this is huge. Remember how books hand you raw source code and your executive network has to laboriously compile it to find the core argument?
Yeah, which is exhausting.
Well, you can offload that heavy biological work to an artificial neural network. Before you open a dense book, ask an AI to summarize the core subversive arguments of the text,
Okay.
and ask it to give you the top 3 examples the author uses to prove their point.
So the AI builds the skeleton for me.
Exactly. When you finally read the actual text, your brain already has the anchor points.
Right, because I know where the author is going.
Your executive network doesn't need to stress about building the frame, so your wandering network can just relax, enjoy the author's detailed prose, and smoothly connect the dots you already know are coming.
You are artificially giving your brain the expert schema. That is a total game changer.
It really is.
Okay, but how do we manually turn on the wandering network while actually looking at a page? Because the sources lay out this really interesting 4-stage activation practice.
Right, so stage 1 is sensory visualization. The wandering network loves physical scenes and imagery. It completely hates abstract logic.
Right.
So you force abstract concepts into physical scenes to shift the cognitive load away from the prefrontal cortex and into the hippocampus.
Okay, let's test this in real time. Let's say I'm reading an economics textbook about supply and demand curves. If I try to memorize the math, my executive network fries. How do I visualize it?
You build a simulation. Don't picture the graph. Visualize a chaotic, screaming vegetable market.
Okay, I'm there.
Picture one single, beautiful tomato left on the table, and a crowd of 20 angry people waving cash, screaming to buy it.
Wow, okay.
You can see the price of that tomato physically skyrocketing in the vendor's mind. You just turned a mathematical abstract into a sensory memory.
I could literally picture the red tomato.
Yeah.
And because I'm visualizing a scene, I'm forcing my brain's simulation network to handle the data instead of my logic processor.
Precisely. Now, stage 2 is self-referential tagging.
Tagging.
The medial prefrontal cortex, the me center of the wandering network, is basically obsessed with your own ego and history.
As we established, yeah.
So as you read, constantly ask yourself, what event in my own life does this remind me of?
Tie the abstract data to my own ego.
Yes. If you read about a psychological bias, immediately try to remember a time you made that exact mistake. It fires up the me center and makes the information incredibly sticky with very low executive effort.
Okay, stage 3 is something called the river method, or no regression.
This is crucial. Never let your eyes go backward to reread a confusing sentence.
Wait, if I read a sentence and I don't understand it, shouldn't I read it again to make sure I got it?
Not if your goal is to avoid fatigue. Rereading instantly triggers your inner executive supervisor who is trying to error check your comprehension.
Oh, right.
That error checking spikes glutamate. If you treat the text like a river that only flows forward, you completely silence that supervisor.
But won't I miss things?
You might miss a minor detail in that one sentence, but you will maintain the wandering flow state and easily grasp the overall context of the paragraph without burning out.
That goes against literally everything I was taught in school, but it makes total biological sense. Okay, and the final stage.
Soft focus, using your peripheral vision.
Wait, how I physically move my eyeballs changes which brain network is active.
Absolutely. The optic nerve is deeply tied to the nervous system. Staring intensely and narrowly at individual words triggers a mild fight-or-flight executive alertness in the brain.
Because it's like a predator focus.
Exactly. It is a predatory, focused gaze. Instead, intentionally relax your facial muscles. Try to take in whole paragraphs with your peripheral vision.
Just soften the gaze.
This wider, softer focus engages the parasympathetic nervous system, naturally inducing that relaxed, wandering flow state.
Okay, I have to push back a little here on a specific rule mentioned in the sources. The 30-second give-up rule.
Ah, yeah.
This idea that if you don't instantly get something, or if it feels too hard, you should just skip the section or stop reading the book entirely.
Right.
I get the biology, I really do, but isn't this just giving up? We're basically pandering to a damaged, TikTok-ruined attention span. By doing this, aren't we losing the rigorous intellectual benefit of deep reading?
It's a very common concern, and it's completely valid, but we really have to look at it from a biological resource allocation perspective.
I'm listening.
It is not about lowering your intellectual standards. It is about recognizing the physical limits of your neurotransmitters. Think about the sunk cost fallacy of a book.
Yeah.
We feel we must read every single page because we bought it or because it's a quote-unquote classic.
Right.
But If reading a dense chapter is building up so much glutamate that you abandon the book entirely, put it on a shelf, and never pick it up again, what have you actually achieved intellectually?
I mean, I've achieved having a bookmark permanently stuck at page 45.
Exactly. By dropping that sunk cost fallacy and treating the book as a buffet rather than a prison sentence, you change the dynamic entirely.
So you just take what you want.
You use these wandering tactics to stick around, find the high-value insights, and absorb them deeply through association and visual memory. You actually end up learning more overall because you avoid the biological burnout that stops you from reading in the first place.
So it is vastly better to joyfully absorb 30% of a brilliant book using the Wandering Network than to painfully force your executive network through 10% of it before your brain literally shuts down from metabolic waste.
Precisely. You are working with your brain's architecture, not fighting against it.
Wow. Let's pull all of this together because we've covered so much ground today.
It's a lot of biology.
We started with the paradox of why reading hurts. We learned that we are exhausted by serious reading not because we lack calories, but because we force our executive network, our logical CPU, to juggle massive long-range logic chains.
Right.
And that intense prefrontal firing builds up toxic glutamate, creating the physical sensation of brain fog. But by treating nonfiction more like a sandbox,
A sandbox,
by
exactly.
skipping around the index, pre-compiling the arguments with AI, and forcing personal visual associations like the Screaming Tomato Market, we can trick our daydreaming network into doing all the heavy lifting for free. We can turn learning into a low-effort simulation instead of a high-stress math problem.
You are shifting the burden from a system that easily fatigues to a system designed to run continuously in the background. It's an incredible hack.
Which leaves me with a final, really provocative thought to end on here. If our brains are biologically wired to learn so deeply, so effortlessly, and so permanently through the narrative associative power of the Wandering Network, why is our entire global education system built around forcing children to use the exhausting, high-friction executive network to memorize linear textbooks?
That is the ultimate question we should be asking.
I mean, what if the reason kids hate reading isn't because they're lazy or because smartphones ruin their brains? What if they hate it because we are forcing them to drive with the parking brake securely engaged, burning them out on glutamate before they even understand the subject?
It's a tragedy, honestly.
And it's definitely something to think about. Try reading a book tonight using peripheral vision. Try visualizing the concepts, and try the give-up rule. See how your brain feels. It might just change how you learn forever. Catch you next time.